Welcome to this lecture. Today we're going to be talking about a very relevant topic that sort of ties the entire world of strength and conditioning together, which is the opportunities and challenges that a strength and conditioning coach would face in the field. So, after sort of being in the industry for such a long time, there are so many SNCs who are new, there are many of them who are quite experienced as well. How has the field of strength and conditioning evolved, and what changes have sort of happened in the world of strength and conditioning that can open up new opportunities but at the same time pose a lot of challenges as well?
Well, some of the changes I've seen is that when I started off, and I'm talking about the Indian context, people used to know that there's a coach and then there's a fitness trainer. So trainer is what still a lot of people maybe still feel. Strength and conditioning, now people are realizing that there's a field, and strength and conditioning means that it is specifically for sport. Because we are in sports science, which doesn't have a very clear definition of what is sports science, what is exercise science, what is performance science. So strength and conditioning sometimes is used as a sport or rather as a sort of faculty which is more to do with movements which are very explosive. So sometimes people think strength and conditioning is just something about a person who teaches rope slams, power cleans, kettlebell swings, flipping tires, taking a hammer, hitting that tire. So people assume that's what strength and conditioning is. But from what strength and conditioning has evolved is that it started off as a strength and conditioning for sport, because sports people needed conditioning. And in the lecture between fitness and strength and conditioning, I've explained this difference. So conditioning as itself is meant for sport. Now, what are the opportunities out there? How has it evolved? One, that now people in India are understanding sport growing, so many sports out there which the government is funding and which is pretty good. I think now there are opportunities out there, there are jobs out there, for strength and conditioning coaches. And the opportunities are, one, to work with state teams, sometimes national teams, then there are leagues which take place in different sport. But one also has to understand that, these are fields where the job opportunities are not as much as other fields. So one really has to be in this kind of field, without looking too much into the monetary aspect. Because unlike many other fields, let's say 100 doctors come out from a college, there'll be 100 doctors who will have 100 opportunities, because they are definitely, if nothing, they can open their own clinic. A strength and conditioning specialist, when he or she comes out of a university, if they don't know where they're going to fit in, they can just sometimes be lost and trying to figure out what they'll do. So we have to understand that out of the general population in the world and in any country, there's a small population that practices sports science, out of which a smaller percentage practices strength and conditioning. And sports persons, as it is, form a small section, and then strength and conditioning for them becomes very specific. So the pressures, I would say, the opportunities are that there are opportunities in different places. The challenges would be that one has to realize that it is all about performance. So that becomes the difference between a strength and conditioning coach and a personal trainer who works in a gym. A personal trainer can work and help somebody lose weight, feel good, and they do a great job. But in strength and conditioning, especially if you're working with high performance sports, okay, it's all about you contributing. If you're not able to contribute, athletes don't come to you, okay, because for them, ultimately, they want results. So the challenges are this, that you have to constantly be on the edge. You have to know exactly, you have to evolve, and you have to constantly prepare people to get sort of, the results they want. So to give an example, kind of an analogy, I'd say it's more like, somebody who cooks food which is more general, and somebody who cooks food which is very specific, which has to have a certain amount of calories exactly measured. Now obviously this person's job becomes much harder, and then if that person's food also depends on how that person will feel, then that kind of becomes a different field, because very target driven, it's very performance driven, okay. Whereas the generic field is there's more people who need. So fitness and strength and conditioning, that's the difference. So the challenges are different, and there are opportunities. The field is growing, but there are challenges as well. People have to be aware of it, that you really have to be on the top of your game. You really need to know what you're doing. Only then can you contribute. And one challenge which is out there, which I would suggest people to realize this before they get in the field, is that athletes can read very fast whether you know your job or not. They will read it very fast because they work throughout their life. So when they come, and if somebody makes them do very fancy exercises, different ones, and if there's no physical improvement, the athlete can know it. Okay. And if we are not contributing the best, there's very small time to display what you know. You don't get a second chance. So whoever gets into strength and conditioning has to understand this aspect. You can't afford to make too many mistakes. So you really have to know what you're doing, and you really have to get those things that you promise. Okay, it is not like working in a gym where you're just telling people to move, walk. And that's the reason why strength and conditioning has a bit of, it has a nice feeling to it, because you work with athletes who then go on to win. And if you've played a role, it makes you feel good. And especially comes the difference between working with non-power driven sports versus power based sports. Somebody who works with sports which don't require much sort of physicality, you can still work and make that person fit. But here in a sport like swimming, 100-meter sprints, you don't have a choice. You have to contribute, and if you don't, the athlete will know. So I think these become the challenges, and sort of, and of course it's a great field, but yeah, there are challenges which we should be aware of.
So the fitness world, especially today with so much of publicity and social media and things, it's flooded with so much of new trends and research. So how should one come to the conclusion of what you need to adopt and what do you need to pass on from this?
Most important, you have to know your basics. And the lecture, one lecture which I've done, and which people, as they do this course, they'll go through, is sports specific training. And in that sports specific, I have explained about the basics that you have to know. The different contractions, the planes of motion, the energy systems. As a strength and conditioning coach, these are the basics. You just have to know. When you know your basics, then you know what to get out of every new reel that you see, or every new research study that comes out. Every new research study does not have to be correct. Every new research paper does not have to be something that adds value. But if you know what you want and what is correct, then you are able to get what you want. So that's why it's important to understand the basics. Get your basics right, get your anatomy right, get your kinesiology right, understand all the basics, then you'll know what to get. Then once you've known your basics, understand the sport. Okay, understand the technical part of it. What's the scoring system? How long do they move? What does each, if it's a team sport, what does each person do? What are the movement patterns for them? Then comes what you can get out of different studies. But if you just look at some reels on Instagram and think that, oh, this looks so cool, this move, this is how athletes train, and there are so many programs out there, right, with very fancy names, then we are just lost. We think like maybe this is what will help. You have to know what will help. Okay, you don't have to look out for something that will help. So old school coaches, who are out there, and good coaches, I would say the main thing is they know their basics very good. They know exactly what is the basics, then they know out of that where it applies. And I think ultimately what matters is that, you get the knowledge that you want, you don't take the knowledge that you don't need. So you don't have to waste time reading about things which don't matter. Okay, because there's enough out there. If we just go on trying to gain knowledge, there's so many videos, there's so much of studying to be done. You have to also realize that you have to work as well. This is not something where you just study and write an exam. You have to work, you have to put things into practice. So I'd say whatever you read, you should know what you want. So get your basics right, there's no choice. Understand the sport. Then you will be able to see, if when you go to a conclusion, you'll know exactly this is what this study proves. Then you have to test it in your workplace and check if it actually makes sense. It might appear very sensible, but you have to still test it. And for this, one very important advice I would say about research is every strength coach and whoever is involved, okay, even a physical therapist, physiotherapist, has to train themselves. So then even if you read that, okay, 5 repetition training does this, and maybe this lift, they have found that latest research says this, you will know because you yourself are doing those moves. You don't want to try those on your athlete only, you have to try that on yourself as well. Yes, so I would say main is this, just make sure that whatever you do, your basics are good, you understand the sport, take what you need, don't take what you don't need.
So another, I would say, challenge that a lot of strength and conditioning coaches or even support staff in general might face is a lack of resources or limitation in terms of access to facilities. So, how should one address this particular problem?
Good question. In fact, this is something a lot of strength coaches will go through, and especially in India, you could be working, somewhere in a remote place or any other country as well. Okay, you could be working in a remote place, maybe not a city, and you don't have great access. Now, what do you do? So there comes the understanding of your basics. We have to understand the equipment doesn't make the difference. It is how you use the equipment. Okay, I give this example that a 10 kilo dumbbell in the city of Bangalore weighs the same as in the city of Delhi, and will weigh the same on the mountains, and will weigh the same near a coast. It is how you use those 10 kilo dumbbells. And the other thing to remember is that the human body is also the same, right? The lever system, the muscle fiber recruitment will be similar in most humans. Some might have more fast twitch fibers, but still the way we train and the results will majority, we can say that there'll be some things we can predict. So if we rely too much on technology sometimes or other equipment, okay, in strength and conditioning, okay, it should not be that if you're in a remote place, you're playing a competition, your athletes have traveled somewhere and they are getting into a tournament. It should not be that now you can't train them because you don't have those equipment and that access to that gym is not there. And then sort of the whole thing falls flat. So you have to know your basics, and you should know if there's a dumbbell, how to use it. And in your training in general, if you are not used to using too many things which require equipment, it becomes easier to transfer that. And you should have a plan that even when somebody trains in practice and in competition, to move from practice to competition, what is it that I will do? You don't have to go to a place and then look for a place and realize, oh, I don't have this. You should have the plan right in the beginning. Okay. So I'd say this becomes the thing, when you have limited resources, you should know before you start. So if somebody works, say, with an academy and they realize that they only have these machines, okay, then they should know that what can I do with these, okay. And if you need something, okay, you should know exactly what you need. So that's why when any place I give advice for setting up a gym, okay, I tell them that don't get even one equipment which doesn't make sense, And sometimes people get these home equipment, for example, to do running. And I always joke and say that over time these become useful for drying clothes, because people just stop using them. So I think one has to remember that whatever equipment that you need, try to keep it basic and try to keep it something in your own setup which will be available generally. Sometimes in our endeavor to show that we have a different gym and it's much more sort of scientific, we might set up things which are very fancy, very expensive, and you don't find them elsewhere, and that defeats the whole purpose. So that's why stick to the basics, understand the human body, understand how to make it stronger. Don't rely on some machine to make it stronger. So I think when it comes to such things, we should anticipate before we even start a program. We should know exactly this is what's available, and then the player should also, this is how strong you can be, okay, this is what we can do. And one thing here, which of course later in the bodyweight exercises we'll be talking about, bodyweight exercises can be done, but there are some limitations of bodyweight exercises as well, that some muscles cannot be worked, specifically like the hamstrings. They cannot be worked through a full range of motion, even though hamstring drops can be done, but not every newcomer can do a hamstring drop. So there are things like a push-up, which is a great exercise, but not every person can do a push-up. So how do you get there? You can do it on a machine and move on and so. So some machines are required, okay, and some things can be done with body weight, but whatever it is, you should have the answers. If you have taken up the contract of working with that team, you have to have plans before, not later. You can't start a job as a strength and conditioning coach and then say that, oh, I don't have the required equipment, because you should have known before that itself designing. So the first thing a strength and conditioning coach should be doing for any place is to visit the gym and see what's available. Then they know what they can deliver to that academy or to that place or to that team. So I think these are important points to remember, that yeah, you should have the plan the moment you take up the contract of working as a SNC coach.
So moving on from resources to actual people in terms of the support staff that might be there as a team for an athlete, what should be the approach when dealing with colleagues in terms of allied professionals. So that could be physiotherapists, SNCs, nutritionists, psychologists, or even the technical coach itself.
Uh, I would say most important here is clarity of roles, because this is something that goes wrong many times. Okay, strength and conditioning coaches, because they themselves train, they might end up giving advice on nutrition. They might end up speaking about supplements. Okay, and if there's a nutritionist in the team, you should not be doing that. Now again, something happens here is a physiotherapist might end up giving advice on exercises. Okay, then the coach might be giving as well, saying that this is what we used to do. Clarity that if the coach gives advice and if the physiotherapist gives, and if you end up giving advice on injuries, okay, or you end up giving advice to the coach on playing, okay, I think this is where mistakes are made by young professionals. They just get so excited and they think we're all a team. And I've always said this, that we're not a team, we are a bunch of professionals working together, but we are not a team. Because when we say it's a team and that we're all working together, then there's no clarity. What is it? Because in a team everybody is equal. Are we all the same? Are we all equal? Are we doing the same job? Can we replace? Can one day the strength and conditioning coach go and teach tennis because the coach didn't turn up? Okay, or can the player go, the strength coach goes and teaches a highly skilled sport like table tennis and says, oh, this is how you should? Obviously not. Same way, the coach should not be speaking about this. But all this has to be made clear in the beginning. A lot of times, clarity is not there, and then people think like, hey, you're welcome to the team. But what is it that you're doing? It has to be asked. It might not be the most comfortable, but it has to be asked. You can't expect to learn on the way. You have to know exactly, this is what I do and this is what I don't do. Okay. So I think clarity comes first. And a lot of times the mistakes that happen, in one lecture I've cleared this about between a physiotherapist and between a strength and conditioning coach, because these both deal with the body. So how do we know? So the answer is pain. The dividing line is pain. When there's pain, the physiotherapist will work. Recovery, the physiotherapist will work. Okay. When it comes to strength and power and going from normal to supernormal, strength and conditioning coach works. And this has to be clear. And we're not saying that any of these people have bad intentions. Everybody wants the player to improve. But if we are not clear what our roles are, that's where conflict starts. One person thinks like, oh, I've been in this field for so long, so I know what is to be done. And the other person thinks like, oh, but I also know what is to be done. I qualified from this university. And the coach thinks, I've trained so many people. Who are you guys to teach me? So I think this clarity is important so that there's no conflict later. Everybody knows their roles, and it might not be the best, but we have to realize that we are there to do a job as part of a team of professionals. And what I would suggest, one more thing which everybody has to understand, is that you are not friends. And when I say this many times, people think that it's not too great, but it is a fact. When you cannot mix your friends and family. Okay, over years you can maybe get along well, but you still have to know you're a strength and conditioning coach. That is what the salary comes for at the end of the month, right? It is not coming to you as the technical coach. So don't give opinions about the technical part. When your player loses, don't go and tell them, oh, they could have played this shot, because what will happen, the player will also start thinking that what is this guy talking about, and what you're good at also, they'll start doubting. So that clarity to know where to speak and where not to. Over the years now, I've been in this field for so long, I don't think I have ever given an advice to any person about how to play the sport, whether they win or lose. I'll just tell them well done, or if they've lost and come back, I'll say, oh, what happened? They say this, that, and I'm like, okay, no worries. There's always another competition. So I'm there to motivate. I have no opinion on the sport, though I have seen so many matches. It is not. I'm not the expert. I don't know to give that opinion. So we should exactly know where to open our mouth, because your intentions can be good, but your actions can be irrelevant at that point. So I think yes, all these people, nutritionists, physiotherapists, psychologists, video analysts, the masseur, especially when working with a professional team, or even at a school level, everybody goes, and sometimes people go for competitions and it's that whole team feeling. So everybody is traveling, but it is still very important to know whose job is what. When you go to a competition, and if the technical coach ends up taking people to the gym, and making them do exercise, that moment, especially before competition, that can create havoc, because that person doesn't know what is to be done, right? And that is not their responsibility. But if they think, no, but I know I'm so and so, I'm this, and they end up doing that, what if something goes wrong? What if there's an injury? Again, who's responsible for that? And there could be, even as an SNC coach, you would have periodized your training to peak at the right time. But if the coach just assumes that he wants to take them to a gym and do some workout, just because that's a belief based program, that he believes this is what will work. Now, ultimately, who's in charge? So the question should always be, who's in charge? You are in charge of strength and conditioning. You should not speak on other things, and you should also be very clear and sometimes firm about protecting what is yours. And if it so happens that somebody says that, oh no, but we used to do this, we used to do this movement, and this is how we used to train back in the days, and this is a problem many strength and conditioning coaches will go through, where somebody will tell them that, yes, but this is what we used to do, because everybody has an opinion on fitness, right? Everybody has something. So one thing to do there is to say that if somebody has an opinion, if they are saying do this, please give it in writing. So, and especially when you're working with very elite athletes, because when things go wrong, people just push the blame on each other. So it has to be very clear. If certain moves are done, if somebody says that I believe Olympic lifting is necessary, that's how you increase, power. And if you're the person who's not done that much or doesn't put it much in the program, but somebody else is saying, the physiotherapist or the coach, they said this is how it has to be, make sure it's all recorded and that you've included that, because you might do it under pressure and something goes bust, then nobody is out there to take a responsibility. So yeah, you have to be very clear to know what you do and also know what you don't know and not to do.
So the next question, or I would say sometimes even a concern that I'm sure everyone in this field has, is the coaching profession is absolutely something that is very demanding. What should one keep in mind so that they don't get burnt out, or avoid being overwhelmed by the amount of pressure or the workload and then end up getting very, very stressed out?
I think some things are like, if you're especially working with a player or a team, and when success comes and this team is good, don't let that success get into your head, like they say, one is that. Second, I would say is be friendly, but don't become friends, especially with students, and especially if you're an older person and your students are young. We all like to be with young athletes, it feels nice to work with them. But you have to understand they are young. And one more aspect that we have to realize is that athletes might be very good at, the sport. They might be the most amazing. If there's a world champion or there's somebody who's an Olympic champion or maybe a national champion in a particular sport, they could be amazing to watch when you watch them in play. But that does not mean that they are sometimes mature. So a 22-year-old, 23-year-old could be an amazing person in sport in a particular country. That does not mean that in other aspects of life, they are also equally mature. And this, I think, is sometimes a problem. And that's why they say, don't get too close to your idols or your heroes, because you might not be impressed when you see them up close and know their lifestyle. So we have to know that we're doing a job to improve their physical capacity, and that's it. So when we are clear about that, I think that burnout doesn't happen. We're also clear. Sometimes the saying is there, that coaching is a very thankless job. And I kind of disagree with that, because I think if you know what to expect, then you don't feel that it's a thankless job. But if you expected a lot, then you will feel thankless, So it has to be such that when you work with a team or a player, you should know that if it doesn't work out, it's okay. You shake hands and you move on. But that clarity has to be there. If you invest yourself too much, if you become a friend or you become like a family, now that's where people get hurt. They think I did so much for you. I tried this and I felt we were a team. And that's why I said we're not a team, we are professionals. So you know what you've done and you know what you cannot do. But if you think like we were all together, we all did it and we all celebrated, then I think that's where the mistakes start. So yeah, like I said, don't get too involved in it. Do your job and know when to sort of cut it. I call it like, putting like a jacket. You should have your work jacket. You wear that and that's what you do, and then you're strength and conditioning coach. And then when you go home, take that jacket off. So then you have a life. Don't make your friends and everything at work. That's where problems start. And when people become friends, they forget what are their roles, they forget the hierarchies, and everything becomes like, hey, we're all having fun. And young people go through this a lot, you know, young coaches, young physios, they just assume that it's all like, we're here to have fun, we're all a team. No, we're not a team, we're all paid to be in that team. You know, friends don't come together and somebody pays them, right? So that's why we are not friends there, we are all colleagues.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sport as it is something where, especially for the players, there's so much of emotions involved. And as support staff, when we get caught up in that emotional aspect of it, I think that's when, like you said, expectations, unrealistic expectations come in. And rather than just investing our time and expertise, we invest our emotions into it. And then we end up, feeling disappointed.
I'll add in this just one point is that sometimes it can so happen that you get caught. You know, you see youngsters who grow up in front of you over the years, right? So you see them and you start feeling concerned for them. And I say this to many coaches: don't become a parent. Even if you seen that kid grow up in front of you, you are not the parent. If you realize that, I think it goes well. And don't become a friend, as in, where you're so close that if they have some personal relationships, there's maybe a boy or a girl who's grown up to be 19, 20, and they have their own personal life. Don't get so close now that now you're helping them. This can again happen with young professionals because they are young. The players might explain to them that this is what's happening. My parents are saying this. There's a friend I have whose parents are saying this. That's their life. Good for them, bad for them. Let them sort it out. Don't get involved, because the moment you get involved, you've crossed the boundary. And again, though intentions would be good, maybe the player also has no bad intentions, but the situation is wrong. Okay, so we have to look at the situation. Be on the right. Don't get into something which later you can't handle yourself.
So, sport these days, with the way it's growing in an increasingly globalized world, what are some things to keep in mind when working with athletes from different backgrounds? And how do you navigate all of these cultural differences, or what are the skill sets that you need to have so that you can practice cultural sensitivity on a day-to-day basis?
I think just knowing about the culture, like I say, before taking up the job, you should know what the job is asking out of you. Same, before you work with a certain athlete from a certain culture, you should know what that culture is. So that's where our research comes in. Now, to give an example, in India, coaches are called sir, right? In England, a sir is somebody who's been knighted by the queen, right? But here we have a culture of, being very respectful. So that sir, when it's called, it's because it's cultural. Now, one should not at the same time think that I have unlimited authority over the child, because now things are changing. Though in India, of course, we have a traditional approach where coaches are respected, teachers are respected, but it's still changing. In cities, it's changing because a lot of children are aware of their rights. Capital punishment is not done now. So people are aware of their rights. So one has to understand that you might be respected, but it's not an authority which is absolute. So if we know that part, then you can do the job that you're sort of, charging fees for. So I think culturally we have to understand where we fit in, and some things again come about, sort of relationships. Maybe in a European country, there's a 17-year-old, 18-year-old who has maybe a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and they're pretty open about it. The coach knows, they maybe talk, and it's okay. Now culturally, that's how it is. It is not about right or wrong, that's how it is. In India, most athletes, even at very high level, won't be doing that, because it's, even if it is, they sort of, keep it a bit under wraps. Again, is it right or wrong? We are nobody to judge, but that's how it is. And we have to understand that. Same way, if one has to go and work maybe in a Gulf country and has to work in a maybe country, where women don't wear sports clothes, they rather cover their bodies. That's how it is. We can't go there and say that, no, but this is how in America, this is what was done. In sports science, I was taught that, people should be wearing these clothes. You have to adjust, don't expect the culture to adjust to you. So I think if we understand this part, that we have to adjust and we have to be the people who get in and, sort of make things work, not around us, but rather we make it work. Then I think everything falls into place. So when you're working with a team, understand where the players are, what is their thinking, how do you motivate them. Somebody who comes, and I've brought this point up many times, somebody who comes within the same country from a higher economic background and somebody else who is not, we have to be conscious of that. We can't just have rules and say that no, oh, everybody has to train, this is it, I don't care what you do. You have to be also taking into account when they go back home, are they getting enough rest, what's the economic status, what's the food that they're getting, so that has to be taken into account. Food habits, especially in India, for example, protein consumption is not as high. In some regions it's low, in some regions it's high. As we go up north, Punjab, Haryana, the dairy production is more, dairy consumption is more. So these do make a difference on structures. We should be aware of this. We can't just say that this is what I studied in New Zealand or South Africa or Australia and this is how it is. It has to apply here. If it's not applicable, I think any knowledge is not useful. The knowledge has to be applicable. So I think cultural sensitivity is an absolute must. You have to. You can't come with a program and say that no, this is how it is. Like I bring this example, it's like a doctor who adjusts the medicine according to the patient. It's not a doctor who has a fixed prescription and says everybody here, everybody will have these medicines. And that's how, because I'm such a great doctor. So we have to adjust to the patients, and those patients in our case, our athletes. So adjust to the culture, adapt to it, get into that, and then sort of, you are able to apply, and then you'll be able to bring a change. But yeah, adapting to a culture is not even a doubt. Whichever, you go, you start working in Western country, adapt to that. You start working here, adapt to that. Okay. But don't expect and don't complain. One mistake that can happen is people, when they work with a different culture, maybe from a different state, they start comparing and complaining. And comparison just starts problems. The moment we say, back home we do this, or this is what we used to do. The moment we compare, that's where the problem starts. Don't compare. There's a job, focus on improving. Don't focus on comparing. The moment you compare, there's always going to be issues. You'll find that, oh, this is what I have to do. This is what we used to do. Just focus on what can you do and make that person better. Make that person's shoulder better, legs better, more powerful. Very simple. You've done a good job. But if you compare and talk about what it is, this, and then again, so many things come in, and you have to be so aware of religion, caste, personal beliefs, their faith systems. You have to be aware of it, so that when if there's a player who likes to maybe pray, that's their choice. You of course don't want it to be such that those prayers are disturbing their practice, and I don't think that happens. But just to give an example, we want to make sure that the player comes for practice on time and does what is supposed to be done, and you make them strong. I think everybody is happy.
Absolutely. I think sort of to tie everything together after this lecture, the opportunities and challenges are something which the good SNCs, or even if you're a beginner, the ones who really make it big are the ones who have the foresight to understand what are the consequences of their actions. And so much of it, being an SNC or a physio or any sort of a support staff, goes a lot beyond just the technical aspects of your job. It's a lot more than just the science or the abilities or the skill sets that you have. So much of it has to do with the coaching methodology. How do you deal with the people around you? How do you deal with your athletes? How do you respond when your athlete wins or loses? How do you keep yourself updated? All of these factors are just as important as it is about maybe working in the gym or doing any sort of a recovery treatment or
There's
anything.
more to it than just lifting weights.
Exactly, precisely. There's a lot more to it than just lifting weights. And I think if everyone out there can understand this particular factor, there's no doubt why you can't be a great support staff, whether it's an SNC or a physio or a psychologist, nutritionist, technical coach, any of it. Thank you.